Welcome to the collection of the wildest and craziest AITA Reddit stories of all time. From wild betrayals to shocking twists, these tales will leave you questioning who is really in the wrong. Let's dive in together. The first story for this collection is from Grell-Re-0T, AITA, for cutting off my BF who enabled my self-destructive behavior during my manic episode. In summer 2022, I cut off my best friend. Didn't even give her a proper explanation, just blocked her. TBH, at the time, I didn't feel like I had to give an explanation, as it was obvious. My ex-best friend and I both have BPD. We clashed a lot as our BPD differed quite a bit. I couldn't stick up for myself, and she always had a problem with me or our other best mate. We were a trio. I also have bipolar, and during a manic episode in April 2022, to be fair, I was undiagnosed at the time. But she had told our other friends she thought there was something wrong with me due to the sheer amount I was drinking, but never said anything to me as it suited her that I was going out. She used me. I was clubbing too much, spending all my money, and am still paying the price today with debts. Her way of coping with her BPD was going out and getting drunk or coked up. When I inevitably crashed, she decided to turn against me as I wasn't going out anymore. I managed to get a bit better mentally, and in August-ish I went to hers. I was still heavily drinking to cope. One night, I got blackout drunk to the point I was sick all over myself, and they had to put me in the bath. I was so hungover the next day, obviously. Now she was the sort of person you couldn't say no to. She had anger issues. If you said no, she would pressure you and get pissy. And she was so unpredictable, she'd try to kill herself over the most random things. I have BPD too, as I said, so I do understand, and I tried to be as understanding as I could to her. A few times we used the wrong tone with her, by total accident, and she would spiral. On the day I was hungover, she said to me, "Why don't we go to this deserted place with a lake that we can chill at?" It was the hottest day of the year. Those of you that live in England understand, the hottest day of the year is awful for us. I did not want to go as I felt really hungover and didn't want to go. I tried to object, but she got stressed, so I agreed. It was me, her, and my boyfriend. We got an Uber to the place, but the Uber dropped us at the wrong point, so we had to walk half an hour. I was like, no way am I doing that, but again, she got aggy. So we just went on with it. Bear in mind, we had one small bottle of water and a few cans of Coke. All of our faults, not just her. I should have thought about it and bought more water. We started walking, and after about 10 minutes, I felt faint. I kept having to sit down. Every time I did, she got more and more annoyed. I was scared of her, so I had to get up and carry on. I drank all the water in the first 20 minutes as I felt so dehydrated, like I was going to pass out. We finally got to the place she wanted to go to, and I was a wreck. Slurring speech, my brain was throbbing, my skin felt like fire. I can't even fully describe the feeling because it was the worst thing I've ever gone through. When I was there, I had to lay down in the shade. I couldn't even lift my head up. My boyfriend, bless his soul, was amazing and kept running back and forth to the lake, pouring water on me, and got my t-shirt and wetted it and put it on my head. She just sat there with the hump. She looked like a toddler whose toys had been taken away. She called our other best friend, complaining about me saying I was overreacting and lying. My other best friend swears blind she stood up for me, but I highly doubt that as she was scared of her too. She then came over to me and started screaming at me, calling me a liar, saying I just couldn't be arsed to walk. And then she said, "I'm going to call an ambulance to prove there's nothing wrong." She called the ambulance out of spite, and then we waited 2 hours. Because the place we were was deserted, they couldn't find us, so my boyfriend had to basically walk me over to them. She stormed off with a face like a bulldog chewing a wasp, and we found the paramedics. They had to walk me over to them, but after 5 minutes of walking, I couldn't do it anymore and collapsed. They had to put a drip in me in a dusty, narrow walk path, and I was just crying. She had already stormed off, so didn't see this happen. They took my blood pressure and shit, and said that if I was out any longer, I could have died. Luckily, a bloke with a buggy car thing helped us get back, and when we got back to her, the paramedics actually had a go at her, and was really quite harsh with her, which I was grateful for. I was in hospital for a few hours, and then went to hers to get my stuff. She was extremely apologetic, and I forgave her. After a few days, I needed a break from her. She had justified the whole situation in her head. She probably still thinks I'm a bitch to this day. She was rude and slagging me off behind my back, whilst being sweetness and light whenever I spoke to her. So, I blocked her. I never spoke to her again. Our other best friend ended up dropping her a few months later too for the fact she treated her like shit. I know I'm better off without her, but I do feel sorry for her as I know she's not all there mentally, like me. So, it's quite a tough one. I know she's mentally ill, but is that really a reason to be able to get away with treating people like shit? And said people making excuses for you every time? Or am I being a bitch? Was I overreacting for cutting her off for this? The reason I post this now after 2 years is because I have been thinking about her a lot. She messaged our other best friend to apologize recently, but not me. It grated me a lot. OP is not the AH. Her ex-friend was abusive, dismissive of OP's health, and toxic in general. Mental illness isn't an excuse for mistreating others. Cutting her off was necessary for OP's well-being. No apology just confirms her lack of remorse. OP's ex-friend is an AH, and I would rate her 3.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. And OP gets a 0. Let's now jump on to the next story from Laura22 Lynch. AITA for not wanting to be my mother's guardian? I recently got a document in the mail titled An Alleged Incapacitated Person for My Mom, asking me, did I want to become her guardian? I have been giving it a lot of thought since then, and decided I didn't want to, but I do realize this could be seen as me being self-centered. There is a very real possibility she may wind up in a nursing home if I don't step up. The sad truth is, me and my mom are not friends. Sometimes we barely get along. There have been times she made me so mad I almost cut her off. This is due to us having very different personalities. She also can be self-centered at times and get tunnel vision on herself, not caring that her decisions and words can affect and hurt others. A good example of this is when she left my dad. She randomly one day starting distancing herself from my dad without explanation. After my brother died during 2020, she left him. The problem is my dad was unemployed at the time. He asked her to give him time to find a job so he won't be homeless. But she didn't give him any time and left him fast. Me not wanting my dad to be homeless stepped up and told him he could live with me as long as he needed. He still lives with me to this day, and we are good friends. It wasn't until after my mom left, she said what the problem was. She calmed that we the both of us treated her wrong, and that I talked down to her. The problem is none of us remembers this. We both agree if she have said something sooner, we could have tried to work through the issues. But now with her being miles away and impossible to visit, this wasn't going to happen. I do believe she is making up us treating her wrong in her head, but I do realize you can accidentally hurt someone without realizing it. So, I have apologized to her and have remained in contact. My dad was very hurt, and so was I. But one day I got over it when I realized I didn't miss her. That us being separated benefit the relationship. It helped us get along better. Therefore, I decided I never wanted to live with her again. My dad, on the other hand, it's complicated. Another good example happened just a few months ago. She had an idea that affected me and my dad's life. Without asking how we felt about her idea first, she acted upon it. We didn't find out into afterwards and was upset. I call her over the phone and try to explain to her how I would have appreciated it being asked first, spelling out to her that I was very upset. But she didn't care, but just went on and on about how good of any idea it was. She got tunnel vision really bad that day. We have fixed the issue since then, and I have forgiven her. But now you can see why we don't always get along. I'm sorry if I painted my mother to be the villain in these examples. I believe she is a nice person deep down. She is an extrovert too, and has many friends. So, people clearly like her for some reason. So maybe I'm the problem, and not her. According to the document, the reasons why they think she is an alleged incapacitated person is because she is a lazy slob. Apparently, her apartment was a mess, which is nothing new. Growing up, I had a cleaner room than she did. In fact, I had to clean up after her. Apparently, they found her forgetful too, which is also nothing new for her. Can talk in loops. It can be annoying. So, I'm not surprised this is happening to her. When I first got the document, I freak out, for I still care about her despite everything. I was ready to be her guardian, so she won't go to a nursing home. I believe stepping up would be the right thing to do, that I should be there for her like I was for my dad. But now that I have had time to calm down and think about it, I realized I didn't want to be her guardian. At all, we barely get along. I realized I didn't want to be stuck living with her, or having to clean up after her again, or take care of her and manage her money. Knowing how stubborn she can be, I know she will probably throw a fit and fight with me every step of the way. I'm caught between my personal feelings and doing what I believe is the right thing to do. So, it's like, do I really want to go through that and be stuck with her? Why should I have to pay for her choices? What about how I feel or my future? Is it so wrong to think about myself for a change? My dad has already decided not to be her guardian too, which I don't blame him for. We don't have any another family, so it all depends on me. If I don't step up, then who knows what will happen to her. I can't help but feel I'm being self-centered. Right now, I just standing back and seeing how things turn out. I just wanted to make it clear that I'm not refusing to be her guardian out of revenge or hatred. I hold nothing against and believe in forgiveness. So should I be her guardian or let her have the consequences of her actions? AITA? OP is not the AH. She has valid reasons, especially her strained relationship with her mom, to refuse her mother's guardianship. It's not selfish to set boundaries, especially when caregiving would negatively impact your life. Not OP, rather, OP's mom is an AH for her behavior, so I would rate her 3.5 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP gets a 0. Let's now jump on to the next story from LucyB44. AITA for nearly ruining my friendship? I, 15F, am in a group of really close friends. We all get along really well, and I've known some of these girls for nearly 10 years. Before I was in this friendship group, I was in a really toxic one, which they helped me leave. So, yeah, we're all really close. However, there's this girl in our group who we'll call Jane, not real name, who took a weird liking to me. At first it was nice because I had never really had a close friend before, but recently it turned kind of obsessive. I started noticing little things like her copying my outfit choices, or even her saying she was dyeing her hair the color I was planning. I was in a long-term relationship at the time with a guy we'll call Max, not real name. Max never really paid attention to Jane, and they both kept their distance, and he even went to calling her weird on one of our calls. Skip a few months, and me and Max go through serious problems in our relationship, which I tell my friends including Jane. During these problems, me, Jane, and this other girl all met up together for a day. It was during this meetup that Jane starts saying how Max has been messaging her about our problems and they've been getting quite close, which I found weird as he never really mentioned her or shown any interest in her with me. Later that day, I caught a glance of her phone, and sure enough she had been messaging my boyfriend. To make matters worse, she had a heart next to his name, and they had been sending kisses at the end of each message. Soon after this incident, me and Max break up, and I'm immediately greeted with a message from Jane asking if I would be mad if they started dating. I didn't want to be the buzzkill, so I said, "No, he's all yours." And I later found out that they started dating not even an hour later. I remember how Jane and Max would continuously talk about how they had liked each other for years, but never made a move because they didn't want to hurt me or a guy, we'll name Dan. This guy had been crushing on Jane for years. Me and Dan both didn't believe this, but kept quiet as we didn't want to start anything. A few months after this, both me and Dan have moved on from the incident, and have slowly been getting closer. Jane and Max broke up a few weeks after dating, claiming how they were both just rebounds after coming out of long-lasting relationships. Eventually, people started telling me and Dan that we would make a great couple and stuff like that. Dan and I have been friends for nearly 11 years, and have never thought of each other that way, but our friends kept nagging until we asked each other out from pressure. Things were going great for a few weeks, until lo and behold, Jane comes into the picture. She starts openly flirting with Dan in front of me, going so far as to even stroke his chest before a PE class, and got all defensive whenever I tried to bring it up. I could obviously tell that Dan was still into her, so I called it off, but wasn't too upset about it, as neither of us really saw each other as more than friends. Skip a few weeks, and Jane starts talking about how her and Dan are now dating. She still sometimes slips comments in saying things like, "Oh, he told me last night that he never really liked you. He only dated you to get over me, but then he would see me, and all those emotions would come back up again." As always, I brushed it off. Skip a few months and I start chatting to this guy who we'll call Aaron. Things are going really well as he goes to a different school and only 2 other people in my school know him. I tell my friends we're dating and they all tell me how happy they are for me. Then one day in maths, Jane and I are snapping people on our phones. She's snapping Dan and I'm snapping Aaron. She looks over my shoulder and says how we should so annoy Aaron and make him jealous. I agree, and she asks for his Snapchat. Obviously, I'm hesitant at first because of everything she's done with my past boyfriends, but then I realize that she's never actually met Aaron and probably never will. Then she starts snapping him daily, claiming it's just for the streaks, yet telling me when he sends a snap of his bare shoulder. Naturally, I start to get nervous, but then think, she's never met the guy. It's fine. Then she got drunk. She was at a party and drank too much so that she couldn't even walk. My friend was telling me how they had to show her a picture of Aaron to get her up the stairs and how she kept calling him fit and just non-stop talking about him. A few weeks later, I begin drowning in stress and decide to put a pause in the relationships. Aaron told me he understood and that he would wait for me whether I liked it or not. After Jane found out about the breakup, she started talking non-stop about him. She even turned around and said how she had had a small crush on him before we even started dating. Bear in mind, Aaron doesn't go to our school, so she could never have met him before. I tell her this, and she turns around and says, "I saw pictures on the walls at a party." I just nodded. A few days later, Aaron tells me that she's flirting with him, and I finally snap. Fine. You want all the attention? Maybe you should learn what it feels like. Aaron and I get back together, but we decide not to tell people, to see how far Jane will go before talking to me. She starts trying to set me up with her ex, saying how he likes me and how well we would work. I ignore all of these and decide to retaliate back at her. Whenever she talked about Aaron, I decided to say how I thought they would be such a cute couple and how they would work so well. I even went so far as to say that I'd put in a good word if she liked. Jane ate this all up, smiling and nodding, as if nothing else mattered, and agreeing for me to say positive things. This keeps going for about a week until one night, all hell breaks loose. Her ex decides to call me whilst being shirtless, so I decide to ask Jane and Aaron and make it a double date. Jane just shows mugs of me to everyone, and me and Aaron are messaging about how long this should go on for. Eventually, we all had to go, and not even 10 minutes later, Jane's ex messages me saying, "I love you." I call her, and she says she pushed him to say it because he does, and I tell her I don't feel the same. She stops talking and sends me a screenshot followed by, "Is it true?" My heart stopped. Someone found out that me and Aaron were dating and told Jane. She hung up the call. I messaged asking if she was okay, but she started yelling, telling me I was a bad friend and how she wanted to end it all. She eventually stopped talking to me and told the friend group what happened. I then got a lot of hate and even someone telling me to kill myself. Maybe I could have gone through with it differently, but this was the only way she would listen. So AITA?
OP is not the AH, but was petty. Jane repeatedly sabotaged OP's relationships, showing obsessive and manipulative behavior. OP retaliated immaturely, but Jane's actions were worse. A healthier approach would have been cutting Jane off instead of engaging in revenge. No scores for now. Let's now jump onto the next story from Brilliant-Garlic-883. AITA for refusing to help my sister pay for her kids' medical bills because of what happened when I needed help. My sister, 28F, and I, 26F, aren't super close. And honestly, we've never really been. She's one of those people who's always had her life together. Good job, nice house, all that. Me? Not so much LOL. I've had my ups and downs, and a couple of years ago it got really bad. So 2 years ago I lost my job. Like completely out of the blue. "Hey, thanks for everything. We're shutting down. Good luck." I was obviously screwed. I had no savings because, life is expensive. And I was living paycheck to paycheck like everyone else I know. My rent was due, and I had literally no idea how I was going to pay it. I was freaking out like, can't sleep, crying all night, stomach in knots level, freaking out. So, I swallowed my pride, which was already in the toilet at this point, and called my sister. I asked her if she could lend me 1,000 USD to cover rent. Not give me, lend me. I promised I'd pay her back as soon as I got a new job. I wasn't asking for a handout. I just needed help. She didn't even hesitate. She said no. Straight up. Like, flat, cold, no. And then she gave me this whole speech about how she doesn't believe in lending money to family because it always goes wrong and ruins relationships. She said it wasn't personal, just her policy, and then basically hung up on me while I was sobbing. I was devastated. Like, I get it, no one's obligated to help me, but I'm her sister. I wasn't asking for anything crazy, I just needed help to not end up homeless. Anyway, I figured it out. I sold some borrowed from a couple of friends, and barely scraped by. But that moment, it stuck with me. It changed the way I see her. Like, she made it very clear that I couldn't rely on her when things got tough. I never said anything to her about it after that because what's the point? But I never forgot. Now, fast forward to last week. Her husband got laid off a couple months ago, and I guess they're struggling, but I didn't know the details because we don't really talk. Then out of nowhere, she calls me. She never calls me, so I immediately knew something was up. She was crying like, full-on sobbing, and told me they need 1,500 USD for my niece's medical bills. It's something about a treatment she needs, and apparently, insurance will reimburse them, but they have to pay up front. She said they're completely out of options and begged me to help. And look, I love my niece. She's 3, she's adorable, and obviously, she's done nothing wrong. But I couldn't help but think about that phone call 2 years ago when I was desperate, and she couldn't have cared less. So, I told her, sorry, I can't help you. And yeah, I might have been a little petty because I threw her words back at her. I said, I don't believe in lending money to family because it always goes wrong. She lost her. She started screaming at me about how this is different because it's her child, not just stupid rent, her words, and how I'm a selfish bitch for holding a grudge over something that happened forever ago. She accused me of punishing an innocent kid just to get back at her, which, okay, maybe that's a little true, but also, where was this whole family helps family thing when I was begging her to not let me lose my apartment? And here's the thing, I can afford to help her. I've worked my ass off these past 2 years to get my shit together, and for the first time in forever, I actually have some savings. But why the hell should I? She made it clear that we're not that kind of family. She set the rules, not me. And now that the shoe's on the other foot, I'm supposed to just forget everything and bail her out? I can't. Of course, she immediately ran to my parents, and now they're all over me too. My mom keeps saying, it's not about her, it's about your niece, and that I'm being heartless. My dad told me I'm acting cold and vindictive. They're both making me feel like absolute garbage, and honestly, maybe they're right. It's not my niece's fault her parents are struggling, but it's not my fault either. And honestly, if I cave now, I know my sister is just going to think she can treat me however she wants, and I'll still come running when she needs me. So, yeah, I feel like shit. But also, I feel like she kind of had this coming. Am I being a total asshole here? Or is it fair to not help her after everything? I can't tell if I'm justified or just being petty.
OP is not the AH. Rather, her sister is an AH for refusing to help OP when she was desperate. And she set the precedent to refuse helping each other in difficult time. While the niece is innocent, OP isn't obligated to bail out someone who denied her the same courtesy. As for scores, I would rate OP 0 and OP's sister 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's not jump onto the next story from long_cell_3734.
Neighbor's dog keeps breaking into our yard and eventually does what I was worried about. I need some advice about an interaction I've had recently with my neighbor. Background on us as neighbors, we've lived next to each other for about 3 years. She was here before we moved in. We've always been friendly with each other, mostly kept to ourselves, and never had an issue until now. We live in a gated community where we all rent, so there's a management office we can go to for issues. A few months ago, their dog, we'll call her Dallas, died suddenly while they were on vacation. Unsure the exact details, but she had to rush back, and Dallas ended up dying of liver failure. This all happened around the August timeframe. We were not the ones taking care of her, and we never had an issue with Dallas. After Dallas died, they got a new puppy pretty quickly afterwards. I'm talking a few days, a week at most. We'll call this new dog Luna. Luna is like every puppy, excitable, has a lot of energy, and likes to jump. Because Luna's skinny, he can squeeze between our fence slats and get into our yard. He's done this pretty frequently, and I've always either gotten him back over the fence or put a leash on him and knocked on their door to return him. I've asked my neighbor to please keep him in their yard, because our dog, we'll call Ghost, is getting older now, and I'm worried about their puppy jumping on his back and injuring him. We also have 4 kids, youngest being 4 years old,
and I'm worried that Luna going to come over and try to play with them and knock them over. She said she'd try to keep Luna out and put up some barricades along a small section of our joint fence. Well, that didn't work. He kept getting into our yard. I'd take him back over and ask her to keep him out. I've started taking pictures every time Luna is in our yard, and I'd say I see him in our yard on average twice a week since they got him. Additionally, over Thanksgiving, her kid's father, we'll call Jeff, was in town while she went on vacation, guessing they're divorced or separated, and Luna got into our yard again. I rang the doorbell, Jeff apologized, and said he had no idea that was happening. Obviously, she didn't tell him, and that he's going to try and think of something to keep him out of our yard. Well, that never happened. Well, 2 days ago it happened. Kids were outside playing while on winter break. Luna gets in and jumps into our youngest. I want to be clear, he's not being aggressive. Just very playful. But regardless, she's terrified, and Luna blocks her path from getting in the house. He wouldn't leave her alone, and she just froze while he's knocking her about. My wife immediately went and pushed Luna away and got our daughter inside, all the while the owner's son, she wasn't home at the time, is outside and eventually hopped the fence and got Luna back. Our daughter's okay, thankfully, no scratches or bruises, but she was definitely shaken and scared. Yesterday evening I went over there to talk to her about what happened. I first asked if her son had told her what happened yesterday. She said that he did not. So I explained what happened and that Luna jumped on our 4-year-old, that she's okay but was scared, but that they really need to keep Luna in their yard, that I had previously told them of my concerns with our kids and dog, and that I really didn't want to go to our management office with this. Well, this set her off, said I was threatening her, that Luna is kept in the garage for 10 hours a day and is barely outside, that she has to come home after work and clean up his and make dinner for her daughter. Then she said, "Oh, by the way, your daughter is bullying my daughter at school." I was taken back by this and asked how she was being bullied because I do take that very seriously. She didn't answer and just ranted on about how their dad only visits once a year and she's doing the best she can. I said I totally understand that, and I wasn't threatening her, and reiterated that I don't want to go to management. I just need her dog to stay in her yard. She said, "Fine, I'll keep him in the garage all day then," and that she doesn't have time for this, and slammed the door in my face. Now I understand her feeling threatened by me bringing up management. However, I don't really know what to do. I really don't want to go to management, but I also have been dealing with this for months now, and nothing's been done about it. And what I was very worried about happening, my kids getting hurt, happened. Am I an ass for handling it the way I did? How do I resolve this? I don't want there to be any bad blood between us as neighbors, but I also want their dog to stop being my damn problem. I've thought about going back over in a day or two, maybe with a small gift as a peace offering, and asking about the bullying. If my daughter is bullying, I want to know so I can put a stop to it. I was bullied growing up, so I want to make sure my kids are not being the bully. And then trying to bring up the dog and see if there's a solution. However, I feel like that's only something that happens in movies. What do you guys think? TLDR. Neighbor's dog broke into our yard, knocked out 4-year-old around. When confronted, neighbor gets very upset and accused me of threatening her. OP is not the AH. He repeatedly addressed the issue calmly, documented incidents, and tried to resolve it without escalating. However, the neighbor ignored concerns, failed to control Luna, and deflected responsibility. OP's priority is his family's safety, which is reasonable. So, instead of OP's neighbor is an AH, and I would rate him 3 out of 5 on the AH scale. What do the Mac Reddit fans think? Is the OP an AH or not? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like the stories I brought you, just hit the like button. Share them as much as you can. And don't forget to subscribe to Mac Reddit for a daily dose. Bye bye. See you tomorrow with some more spicy fries.